What are the types of crimes and scams these ladies are into? Let's find out, starting with number 5, burglary in Brazil. A cat burglar has struck in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, as a woman pulled off a daring and lucrative heist at a luxury condo for possibly one last big score. The smooth criminal managed to steal over $190,000 in luxury jewelry, bags, and other expensive items in less than an hour before making her escape. The thief had surveilled the condo and easily gained entrance by telling the doorman she was visiting someone on the 8th floor. But instead of taking the elevator to the 8th floor, she lied. The woman headed up to the 7th floor through the service elevator, totally fooling everyone. When she reached the apartment, the sneaky sneak broke down the door in an unsneaky way, ready to start her 50-minute-long search. To cover her tracks, the criminal mastermind had the cunning to put on black gloves. You're probably thinking, what? Black gloves? Was she making a fashion statement? You're going to feel so ridiculous when we tell you it was to hide her fingerprints. She also wore dark sunglasses, not because she was too cool for school, but to obscure her face as she kept her identity a secret. She didn't want anyone to know it was her because she's thinking like 95 steps ahead. In what was likely an effort to taunt the authorities, maybe there's some detective that's been tracking her for years at the cost of his own marriage, a surveillance camera caught her as she readjusted her hair bun without her identity concealing shades. We have to give it to the girl. Even if she was trying to not be seen, she still got to look good in case she was. After gathering all her spoils, the woman made her escape with a male companion unexpectedly waiting outside the building. It's possible he said something to her about yet another final score, and she was like, USOB, I'm in. Wasting no time, the two ran down the street with the nearly $200,000 worth of items on possibly another daring heist. The owner of the property, who runs a local car dealership, was away on vacation with his family. You know, there's going to be a sequel to this crime where he goes on a worldwide search for her. Everyone was completely shocked beyond all expectation when they observed the aftermath of the heist. The doorman was left dumbstruck. He had no clue that the nice lady he let through the door to go to the 8th floor would leave with hundreds of thousands of dollars of jewelry, bags, and other valuable objects, and not even go to the 8th floor. Not even once. The Belo Horizonte police have released 2 photos of the woman, since she's the only suspect in the case, but good luck making an arrest, guys. You're playing checkers, she's playing chess. Belo Horizonte, with its 2.7 million residents, is considered the 3rd safest city in Brazil, according to TravelSafeAbroad.com, which makes the suspect's clean getaway all the more impressive. With a low-down criminal like this running around, though, it may now be the 4th safest. Number 4, Mother Teresa of Ponzi. Johanna M. Garcia was many people's saving grace. Advertised as a Mother Teresa and a kindly investor, she promised to help regular people and small businesses generate wealth. She and her company, Capital Funding LLC, sought to make loans and other forms of short-term financing that would yield a robust return on investors' money. She sold this service, known as Merchant Cash Advance, as a way to purchase future receivables and guarantee a steady income flow. In just over a year, Garcia's efforts were highly successful, with over 15,400 investors pooling $196 million. In actuality, what she was doing was less miraculous and more lucrative Ponzi scheme. In this case, Garcia and her team perpetrated the massive fraud by purporting to provide a 10% monthly return and annualized rates of 120% to 180%. However, the money was instead used to grease the palms of company insiders and fund luxury items such as vacations, clothes, and even cryptocurrency. It was only made worse by the fact that unlicensed brokers were used in the sales of securities during the scam. The signs of the company's undoing began to show when a website was created with a URL similar to MJ Capital's called MJ Capital Ponzi that publicly accused the company of running a Ponzi scheme. Garcia responded by suing the website creator, which only aroused cause more suspicion. The next nail in the coffin came in June 2021 when an undercover FBI agent visited their Pompano Beach office. After ascertaining Garcia's identity as the company's leader, they quickly made sense of the situation. Garcia wasn't named in the criminal proceedings against Pavel Ruiz, a company board member, who was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud. However, the U.S. Attorney's Office didn't confirm or deny the existence of a parallel criminal investigation against her when contacted. Nevertheless, Garcia has reached a partial settlement with the SEC, which would essentially put the agency's complaint against her on the back burner. Ruiz was also met with a similar settlement, with monetary relief set to follow the conclusion of any criminal proceedings. He currently remains out on $250,000 bail. Number 3. Fake cancer, real escort. Tanya Rowe is one of Britain's most notorious and prolific con artists. For over 15 years, she's deceived numerous victims with her crafty tricks and lies. She appeared in court via video link, where she pleaded guilty to fraud for forging documents and posing as an international events manager for the high-end jeweler Cartier. Rowe, who was actually an escort, had used many identities over the years: a Wonder Bra model, a barrister, and an Italian heiress. Her newest fraudulent act was to allegedly scheme over £70,000 in gifts and cash from an 83-year-old retired businessman. After taking his money, Rowe allegedly used fake Cartier payslips to rent a £250,000 apartment. The elderly man, who wasn't named for legal reasons, was entranced when Rowe introduced herself as Mia Bella Cavalli, an international events manager with high-end jeweler Cartier, and definitely not an escort. She bamboozled him with stories of her wealth, telling him she had a significant inheritance from her Italian father. The elderly bachelor had met Rowe at a restaurant, and he was quickly infatuated. Rowe discovered that the man was planning on moving and offered to help him find a place, and the relationship blossomed. The man was so enamored that he showered Rowe with expensive gifts, including a £7,850 Rolex watch and a new Ford Focus for her son. We guess a Ford Escort would have been a little on the nose. Not long after, Rowe revealed to him that she had breast cancer and was facing eviction from her flat since she hadn't been paid by Cartier. The man bought her story and handed her money. First, £2,200 for rent, then smaller payments of £200 and £400 a day to help with daily living. In early 2020, he gave her another £28,000. The retired businessman also believed Rowe was in the process of selling a £3.8 million house, name-dropping celebrity chef Heston Blumenthal as being interested in buying it. Rowe insisted the gifts and cash were gifted as part of a sugar daddy adult relationship. The pensioner claimed their relationship wasn't physical, and he had no clue she was an escort. Rowe also claimed that the man then became a client, regularly spending £300 for her time, which included intimate special time encounters. Rowe also claimed the man became controlling and obsessive, constantly blowing up her phone with texts. He even allegedly gave her a surprise toy that was made gold and platinum and could be used as a personal massager on her doorstep for Christmas. Oddly enough, this was the same Christmas gift we left our Amazon delivery guy for Christmas as well, so his story about there not being a relationship is totally believable. Rowe's scheme eventually unraveled in January of 2020 when she was found guilty of fraud after forging Cartier payslips to lease a £250,000 apartment. Tanya Rowe has been labeled one of Britain's most prolific con artists with a criminal history spanning over 15 years. Since she was only 18, she has been part of the criminal world. One of her most extreme deceptions came when she convinced a magazine to run a feature story of her battle with terminal breast and ovarian cancer. She even used her position as a cancer patient to move to the countryside and claim to be a kickboxing instructor and a Wonder Bra model. After a short while, she started to allege that her lover had cheated on her, and soon after left town, saying that her cancer had spread. During her schemes, Rowe had used a variety of guises to manipulate people, from an Italian heiress to a barrister, to even convincing small business owners and taxi drivers that she had terminal cancer. She posed as a wealthy individual and used her charisma to make people feel indebted to her, even going so far as to flash details of her own £3 million home she claimed she was renting. With every change of town, Rowe was able to con again. Rowe moved to Windsor and began to create her fake identity as Riley Cruz, eventually finding a property developer she could con out of £30,000. Finally, she ended up in another small town where she posed as a barrister and conned a pub landlady of £1,500 and a restaurant owner of £4,000. The lengths Rowe had gone to defraud people were impressive. Mrs. Rowe once wanted to take a trip, so she convinced a trusted friend's son to pay for a 2-week, all-expenses-paid trip to Vegas, where the pair supposedly blew thousands of dollars. The Kellets, victims of the scam, said that their trip was cut short when Rowe told him her cancer had spread. Rowe would regularly move around, and instead of paying rent on her new properties, she would infiltrate small towns and befriend people. She then used her supposed terminal cancer as an excuse to convince her new acquaintances to pay her rent and deposit money on her behalf so that she couldn't be evicted immediately. In February 2021, Rowe made an appearance in court via video link, where she was given a 15-month jail sentence, suspended for 18 months for her scheme to scam her sugar granddaddy. While she may have put on a show of remorse, the jury was unable to reach a verdict on whether or not she defrauded the elderly businessman or if he had willingly given her the money. It has been suggested that Rowe's false identity has become part of her identity. Her inability to resist her sinister ways gives reason to believe that it might only be a matter of time before she strikes again. It remains to be seen whether she's actually remorseful or whether she'll keep lying and deceiving her way back to freedom. If Tanya Rowe can't clean up her act, she'll end up getting escorted to jail. Number 2. 7 years of fraud. Sana Durbis was recently convicted of fraud-related offenses and sentenced to prison. Her crimes included swindling over $2 million from a group of 7 lonely men between 2008 and 2014 in order to fund her extravagant lifestyle. Durbis used a complex web of lies to deceive her victims, building their trust by posing as a wealthy Egyptian with whom they could share a relationship. She would request help with seemingly legitimate payments such as bank charges, taxes, and solicitor fees in exchange for promises of an impending inheritance. Durbis's lies were far-reaching and frequent, such as claiming to need funds for her dead mother's funeral, her son passing away due to swine flu, and her unborn child to a terrible ex-partner. She would engage men in a romantic manner, texting them that she loved them and couldn't wait to be with them, followed by saying she hadn't eaten since yesterday. The men were also asked to pay for fictitious hotel rooms, which Durbis would never appear for, claiming her sick family members were preventing her from attending their scheduled rendezvous. Even when the men became suspicious and reported the fraud, Durbis would respond by asking how just borrowing money can be considered a fraud. Durbis's defense lawyer attributed her actions to desperation and need after having to provide for 4 children and also act as a carer for her mother and brother. However, police fraud squad commander Arthur Katsagianis was quick to point out that the victim's courage to come forward and follow through with the case shows the gravity of her behavior. Durbis's sentencing judge also noted Durbis's talent for impersonation, intricate web of lies, and utterly determined mindset in obtaining the funds. The fallout of the sentencing didn't finish in the courtroom either. Durbis's family and friends who had come to show their support were furious as they clashed with 9 and 7 News camera crews, even resulting in a 7 News reporter being knocked to the ground. Even so, the police assured the reporters of an investigation and eventual prosecution of those responsible, and Jason Morrison, the 7 News Sydney director, was pleased to state that the reporter was found unharmed and the cameraman only suffered minor injuries. Durbis was handed a 3.5-year sentence with a non-parole period of 18 months. Number 1. The Vax cards weren't the only fakes. Internet sleuths were shocked when Jasmine Clifford, a woman from New Jersey who had the Instagram moniker @AntiVaxMama, found to be behind a massive fake coronavirus vaccination card scheme. Better known as a 5-star Jazzy, Clifford was an exotic dancer that seems to have awarded herself only 5 out of 10 stars. Clifford was alleged to have sold roughly 250 forged cards through her Instagram account, as well as worked with another woman who had access to a medical clinic in Patogi, New York. The main culprit behind the scheme was Clifford, but her accomplice, Nadeza Barkley, was charged with a felony as well. 13 customers, many of whom were medical professionals, were also charged with felonies. Clifford advertised a stripped-down card at $200 and offered a premium one for $250 to enter the customer's name into New York's official immunity database. Once in the database, they could obtain a digital certification of vaccinations. Clients could likely also pay for the cards in ones. Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance caught wind of the scam and appealed to Facebook to take action against the fraud and warned that forged vaccination cards could have serious public safety consequences. Facebook acted swiftly, removing Clifford's account and promising to review any other accounts where counterfeit cards are being advertised. Little did anyone know, a TikToker by the name of @Tizient had already highlighted Clifford's fraudulent activity weeks before. Michael, the independent filmmaker behind the TikTok handle, was committed to fighting off misinformation spread through social media. After experiencing the loss of a loved one due to COVID-19, Michael was appalled to see Clifford's dangerous workaround online. Michael's video prompted Clifford's investigation and subsequent legal actions, although the charges were brought against the accused beforehand. Using his online presence, Michael alerted Manhattan prosecutors to Clifford's scheme, which then led to an undercover investigation in late June. According to the criminal complaint against Clifford's co-conspirator, Nadeza Barkley, one undercover customer was able to pay Clifford $200 for a card and was sent a copy of the forged recordings. An additional undercover customer was able to provide Clifford information to input the New York State vaccination database, as well as $250 for her service. The investigation into Clifford and Barkley was ongoing for 2 months until Michael's video was released to the public. In the end, 13 people were charged with criminal possession of a forged instrument, and Barkley, who worked in a medical clinic in Patogi, was charged with offering a false instrument for filing and conspiracy. Clifford, who ironically ran a boutique where people put clothes on, was also charged with 2 felonies and 1 misdemeanor related to the scheme. These scamming doctors are the exact type of people you don't want treating you or anyone you know. Let's dive right into their stories. Number 5. All tired out. O'Neill Ron Morris, also known as the Duchess, was a transgender con artist and self-proclaimed doctor who injected various industrial substances into people's behinds in order to give them a bigger caboose. Morris used a cocktail of various substances, including cement, superglue, and fix-a-flat tire inflator, giving new meaning to the term having a flat butt. Morris had already been caught once before for practicing medicine without a license. However, she continued to operate illegally, often using fake names and advertisements to lure customers. Morris's biggest scam was injecting industrial-grade silicone into people's behinds as part of an enhancement procedure. Even performed under a doctor's care, medical-grade silicone is a dangerous substance that can lead to serious health consequences and isn't FDA recommended for beauty fillers. This is also a rare instance where contracting authorities overlaps with the FDA, and they also recommend against using industrial-grade silicone as beauty fillers. Finally, they both agree on something. Morris was injecting her victims with silicone when she purchased at her local Home Depot, since they probably had better prices than Lowe's. Dubbed the toxic tush doctor, she was convicted of manslaughter after one of her clients passed from complications stemming from the injections they received. During her trial, it was revealed that Morris had placed ads on sites like Craigslist and Backpage offering, quote, buttocks enhancement services. Her victims would often pay upwards of $2,000 for the procedure. Many victims came forward with stories of how Morris had injected them with the industrial-grade silicone, often without anesthesia. One victim spoke of how she was left with lumps and bumps all over her behind, and another said she was in so much pain that she couldn't sit down for weeks. In total, Morris is believed to have injected more than 50 people with industrial silicone. Morris began her career sometime around 2006 when she injected a woman's butt with a combination of cement, fix-a-flat tire sealant, and superglue. The woman soon developed necrosis, which is basically that part of the body decaying or dying. She had to have surgery to remove the injection. Another of Morris's victims stated that she had received injections from Morris on 3 separate occasions. The first time was in 2007, and it was a mixture of silicone and an unknown substance. The second time was in 2008, and it again was silicone and an unknown substance. The third time was in 2009, and it was a combination of crazy glue, super glue, liquid nails adhesive remover, and cement mix. Unfortunately, this victim also developed necrosis and had to have surgery to correct the damage done by Morris's treatments. In the end, Morris was sentenced to 10 years in prison, though she will only serve 4 years due to a plea deal. However, many many believe that she deserved much harsher punishment considering the seriousness of her offenses. Her victims were left scarred, both physically and emotionally, but at least they can rest assured knowing that the toxic tush doctor is now behind bars where she belongs. Number 4. OBGY No. Dr. Javid Purwaitz was a well-respected OBGYN in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia for nearly 4 decades. But it turns out that all that time, he was preying on his patients just to make a quick buck. Dr. Purwaitz scammed Medicaid by billing for procedures he never performed. But the true horror came when Javid actually did enter the operating room. Over the course of a decade, Dr. Purwaitz performed irreversible hysterectomies, sterilizations, and other surgeries on his patients, in many cases using broken equipment, giving at least 173 women life-altering surgeries. According to prosecutors, Dr. Purwaitz would convince women that they needed certain operations by telling them exaggerated or outright false information about their health. In some cases, he would tell patients that they had cancer or were at risk of developing cancer if they didn't have a hysterectomy or some other surgery immediately. In many instances, the surgeries occurred within days of the false diagnosis. Sadly, these surgeries were completely unnecessary, put the women's health at risk, and changed their lives in a way that cannot be undone. The equipment Dr. Purwaitz used was often damaged or wasn't sterilized, and he regularly reused single-use gloves. As a result, many of his patients suffered complications from the surgeries, some of which were life-threatening, leaving many with irreparable damage. 25 of Dr. Purwaitz's patients testified at his sentencing hearing, sharing their stories of how Dr. Death, as he'd been dubbed, had ruined their lives. One victim shared a story that on Dr. Purwaitz's recommendation, she had a hysterectomy in order to avoid potential cancer, only to learn that the surgery was unnecessary and that she will never be able to have children of her own. Another victim said she also thought Purwaitz was acting in her best interest when he told her that she needed a hysterectomy as well. She has since experienced a myriad of complications due to Dr. Death's handiwork and now has to take medication to control the symptoms for the rest of her life. Many of the women who testified against Dr. Purwaitz said they kept him as their doctor even after their procedures because they trusted him. It wasn't until they started hearing news reports about his criminal activity that they realized how badly they had been harmed. In November 2020, following an expert opinion which deemed a staggering 52 surgical procedures performed were unnecessary, a federal jury convicted Dr. Purwaitz of 52 counts of healthcare fraud and false statements. In total, Dr. Purwaitz was responsible for over $20 million worth of false and fraudulent billings for both himself and the hospitals where he performed the surgeries. What did he trade his victims' ability to ever have children for? Lavish gifts for himself and others, including luxury cars like Bentleys and Ferraris. In April of 2021, Purwaitz was sentenced to 59 years in prison, which meant that at 71 years old, he will likely spend the rest of his life incarcerated. While that may provide a small amount of satisfaction to his victims, no amount of prison time can undo the damage that Purwaitz has caused. Number 3. Dr. Staged. Dr. Sadie Ribeiro was a pain management doctor and surgeon. He's facing up to 10 years in prison for his role in an insurance fraud scheme that bilked millions of dollars from poor and vulnerable patients. Ribeiro pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with the scheme. Ribeiro enticed more than 400 homeless and drug-addicted patients to submit to surgeries they didn't need so that he and his partner could take payouts from the insurance companies. Ribeiro is the second person to plead guilty in the case. Adrian Alexander, 77, who owned a litigation funding company that was behind the scheme, previously pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. According to a federal indictment, Ribeiro and Alexander spearheaded an extensive insurance fraud scheme through which participants staged trip and fall accidents and subsequently filed fraudulent lawsuits that enriched both men to the tune of $31 million. The patients, many of them homeless or addicted to drugs, were enticed with small sums of money to participate in the scheme and then underwent unnecessary back surgeries and other medical procedures so that Ribeiro and his partners could collect insurance payouts. Patients were also instructed to receive ongoing medical care and chiropractic treatment from specific medical professionals, usually Ribeiro, under the guise that it was required for their lawsuit cases. In some cases, the defendants even created fake x-rays purporting to show disc herniation stems to justify lump lumbar spinal fusions on otherwise healthy people as young as 20 years old. This greedy criminal offense not only took advantage of people who could ill afford it, but put their lives at real risk. Victims often had little choice other than to comply, so long as they continued to receive benefits like food, clothing, and other assistance. From 2015 until 2018, more than 400 people participated in the scheme, many of them recruited while receiving assistance at homeless shelters around New York City. Many were drug addicts or homeless with mental issues. Alexander typically funded each personal injury lawsuit by loaning participants $30,000 to cover living expenses, court fees, costs related to surgical bills, and other associated costs. Invariably, those loans carried extraordinarily high annual percentage rates, often 100% and upward. As a result, almost all of any settlement or damages awarded went towards satisfying the loan, leaving participants with little or no funds. Ribeiro admitted that he performed close to 200 surgeries on patients who were part of the scheme and also paid kickbacks for patient referrals. In addition to facing up to 10 years in prison, Ribeiro has agreed to forfeit more than $500,000 to the U.S. government and make a restitution payment of nearly $4 million. Ribeiro is scheduled to be sentenced on January 5th, 2023, and Alexander on November 30 of this year. Number 2. Masquerading. Sarah Kane was banned from every hospital in the UK after being caught posing as a doctor twice. Most recently, she avoided jail time by admitting to the charges of impersonating a doctor and theft of medical equipment. Kane had been masquerading as a doctor for some time, even going so far as to post pictures of herself in scrubs on Facebook with captions like, "Work can be a time for pulling faces." Neighbors interviewed after her guilty plea said that they had no idea she wasn't actually a doctor. One close friend described her as a Walter Mitty type, someone who is prone to wild flights of fancy because she was unsatisfied with her life. Posing as a doctor, Kane was seen by 2 nurses who recognized her from when she had been treated there before. She claimed to be training as part of her doctorate, but it quickly became clear that she didn't really know what she was doing. CCTV footage showed her wandering around the hospital for hours before being confronted by staff and eventually arrested by police. When officers searched her house, they found a trove of medical equipment that she had stolen from the hospital, including surgical scrubs, bandages, syringes, and saline solution. Although she avoided jail time, Kane was fined £440. Thankfully, she never interacted with any patients, just walked around the hospitals aimlessly. No harm, no foul? With all these shady medical professionals running around, the only ones we trust are Dr. Dre and Nurse Slim. Number 1. Off-brand. Sine Marie Brand was a bogus cardiologist who was operating in South Africa. She was arrested after it was discovered that she didn't have the proper medical qualifications to be practicing medicine. Brand was accused of advertising for house calls using the information of a registered physician and also issuing fake prescriptions to people seeking medical attention. Brand could have easily put people's lives in danger had they taken the fake prescriptions or listened to her phony medical advice. Luckily, she was arrested before anyone was harmed. Police were first tipped off by a patient who grew suspicious after receiving a prescription from Brand. Brand initially denied any wrongdoing, but soon began to change her story as inconsistencies were discovered, such as claiming an actual residence rather than crashing on a former cellmate's couch. Brand also failed to appear in court for one of the bail hearings, and a warrant for her arrest was issued. On what was expected to be her last bail application, Brand suddenly announced her intention to plead guilty to all the charges against her. Seeing as she pleaded guilty, the judge found Brand guilty on 10 counts of violating medical practice laws and 1 count of fraud. Brand was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and her case has been widely publicized in order to warn the public about fake physicians. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section, would you rather be 21 and have no money or 65 with $20 million?